All right, so first of all, welcome. Those of you that didn't meet me yesterday, I'm Ben Monroe with Arnett Monroe and Associates. I'm recording this so that board members that weren't able to join us can take a look at the recommendations later. As you know, this is a branding tech visit. Had the privilege of being here 11 years ago and working with the resource team then. Made some recommendations, and it's really nice to be able to kind of come back and see how much has been done in Monroe over that time, and then also just make some recommendations kind of moving forward. Quick recap, great meetings yesterday, met with the board, met with each of the committees, a lot of really good things going on, good input. There was a strong desire to use this opportunity and use the concept of branding and communication to help carve out a better awareness of Main Street. And I mean, there were a lot of complaints, and I'm not really, I don't understand why people would be confused who's in charge of things. When, this is, I will tell you, I don't think I've ever worked in a place that has literally just used the exact same logo.
Ours is missing the plus.
Right.
Ours is different.
When I was here back in 2007, it was shortly after this logo had been developed for the city, and it was in the initial phases of rollout. It had some really, really good bones to it. One of the biggest things that I had recommended at that time was treating the right-hand side of the Canton as an interchangeable graphic element where different organizations would have different colors as their designated colors. We designed one for the chamber where the right-hand side turned essentially into a slice of cheese. We went through with the Main Street organization, and they got more of a brick color referencing the courthouse color, and then different colors for each one of the 4 committees. But still, it was still very much founded in the same graphic set, okay? And then the other thing that it did was it adopted that Swiss Canton shape as kind of the continuous element. So if we fast forward to now, one of the things that the community deserves credit for is consistent implementation. There has been a visual sign of working together. This logo has made its way out on new wayfinding signage throughout the community that is very well done. So one of the things that we want to be able to do is we want to create something that allows you to stick out, but not necessarily, it is a complete departure from the graphic system, but it's not a complete departure from the concept, if that makes sense. Typically, the way that I approach this is I like to talk about the branding toolbox and how there are 4 main components to this branding system. I think a lot of times people really think this is about your Main Street logo, and that's really where we are. There are 4 main components we want to look at. The first is the color palette. Second is your typefaces that you use. The third is consistent messaging, and then the fourth is your approach to graphics. And if we go back and recap, the colors that you've been trapped into are red and black, and everybody's red and black. The script typeface that was part of the overall brand is very dictatorial. It's very hard to use that consistently because by nature, a script isn't intentionally designed to be legible. So we're going to introduce some new concepts there for you to be able to tap into. For the overall message, I'm going to throw 2 different messages out there for you. I think that they're very congruent, but I think that they acknowledge the slight differences in some of the things you're dealing with here in Monroe. And one of the big ones is just really what Main Street does. And I think we're going to, attribute and pay credit to some of the things that we heard directly. As far as the overall graphics, I felt like you needed something that was clean and modern, but modern in a way that's not scary modern that's still based in traditional, if that makes sense. So it's not the kind of thing that's modern. It's modern. It's up to date. It's clean. It's fresh. It connects with the kind of people we want to communicate with. I always try to recap brand values, the things that I heard you all say over the course of the meetings, and just some simple words: comforting, feels like home, traditional values, quaint. And I put the word constant. I think that it's an interesting conversation we had towards the end of the day yesterday where downtown Monroe never experienced the dead, like the drop. It might have changed and it might have declined, but it never left that point of being vital to the community. So its low was not as low as other downtowns might have experienced. Because of that lack of low, you might have lacked some of the kind of redefinition by necessity. If you don't get desperate, then you don't necessarily need to be creative. So it's allowed maybe the community to rest on laurels from not from an effort standpoint. It's obvious you put effort in, but from kind of an identity and a creativity standpoint. So being able to kind of step up there. So with the color palette, I wanted to do something that was kind of bright and vibrant. Now, colors never look right on projectors, so give me a little bit of leeway there. But I wanted to have a palette that's still very much connected with the red because we knew that that was going to be dominant throughout the community. But I no longer wanted red to be your dominant color. I feel like being able to use a dominant color set that can be truly yours will help you to set yourself apart. So I selected 4 colors, 2 different shades of blue. That's actually a nice dark kind of indigo blue, and then kind of a medium blue, and then the red, and then a green. It'll just give us that opportunity to have a broader color palette without being so broad a palette that it feels elementary or amateur. For a little while, instead of having the dark blue, I had kind of a yellow tone, like a, I don't know, cheddar cheese color. And it just, honestly, it felt amateur. It didn't feel professional enough for what I wanted to convey. So I ended up going up with the double up blues, and you'll kind of see how that comes together. With the typeface, I selected 3 different typefaces. Your primary typeface is an all caps, what I refer to as a smooth serif. So the letters have a very elongated serif on them. I learned in school that the definition of a serif is a doohickey. So, you know, there's little things that come off the letters. Serif typefaces feel traditional. And there's definitely a reemergence and kind of a renaissance right now of using serif typefaces. We're on the front end of those really gaining some steam again. We had abandoned those for a long time, and we're using a lot of sans serifs. So I think that this positions you in a way that is going to work very well. And it won't be until the next slide, but I'm very, very deliberate when I pick that primary typeface. I want a typeface that Monroe looks good in. Because strangely enough, we don't put enough emphasis on the connective power of that typeface selection. So if we can do a Monroe that looks really good when it says Monroe, then simply using a consistent Monroe brings things into a brand system without having you have to use all the other things. The secondary typeface is a very clean sans serif typeface, and it comes in like 7 different widths or weights. That gives you a lot of variation. So if you go super thin, you feel a lot more contemporary. You go nice and thick, and you feel bold and feel like you're kind of making a statement. So it's a nice one, and I always like a sans serif that's got a good round O to it. It creates some congruence because both of the typefaces have pretty round O's. I know that doesn't matter to y'all, but just trust me, it makes a difference when you put things together. They look like they go together. And then finally, with the accent typeface, a slight departure from the one that you all have used. I cannot remember exactly which one it is. Do you remember by any chance? I've got it loaded on my computer because it's been loaded since 2007 when, you know, we were using it. But the typeface is not particularly expandable. Looks good in Monroe, doesn't necessarily look good in other words. So I wanted to have something that felt like it was a little more touched by the human hand, where that particular one, you can tell it's a script, but you can also tell it was very designed for the computer. So that's your typeface palette. From there, the word type, you can just see this is very solid. you're a historic community with a square downtown, a lot of solid things going on. This gives you a solid foundation that allows all those other things to give some life and some kind of whimsy to it. Then, from a graphic standpoint, I wanted to create a simple icon. I know we had talked about activity. I want something that is simple enough that it can come to represent all the amazing things that you do in Monroe. When we sat there with the promotions committee yesterday, it was like, okay, when is the list of the events you do going to stop? And it's like, it kept going, it kept going, it kept going, it kept going. So you cannot represent with a single icon the dynamic natures of the community. So we wanted to create something that was clean and simple, that falls into the category where it feels appropriate with everything else, but could also truly be yours. So I started with a simple representation of the square, because that is kind of the architectural base of what it is that you are representing. We still know that we're talking about downtown and not just the square, but those are things that we're kind of working through. Your square is a unique element. It's something that we've always promoted. Even to your wayfinding signage, it points people to the historic square. Giving a stylized monogram of the M, bringing in elements that represent the 4 points of the Main Street approach, and then bringing in that signature tower with this kind of up arrow. Very simple, but then when you tie it all in together, you have this image that it kind of works, And then it introduces this idea that you said in our first meeting. What do? We're bringing people together. And that's the goal in every single aspect of the Main Street approach. From an organization standpoint, you want to be a place that is a place that people congregate. You want to connect prospects with opportunities. You are constantly bringing those things together in downtown. Now, with this, one of the nice things about a system like this is it works very well in one color. You can create stacked versions, you can create horizontal versions, so you've got a lot of versatility with it. But then it also starts to work when you go out into doing some of those things that we talked about doing. There's a great conversation about window clings and being able to show businesses how they're connected. So you could design a window clean that might look like this, and then you're tying in that concept of being proud to be connected to the downtown and also connected with the organization. I talked about the idea of creating a PowerPoint template. So I designed a title slide and then 2 different content slide variations so that you can convey all the progress that's going on to council in kind of a professional way. Things like business cards. So doing kind of a front and a back on the business card. And then this little card right here I've found to be very, very helpful. I call it a courtesy card. It gives you an opportunity. You can print, 1,000 of these. You can give a handful of them to each of your board members. And so it's not just, Jordan doing this. It literally is anybody. Anytime you stop in, and it doesn't have to say, sorry, we missed you. It could say, just stopped in, popped in to see you, whatever. Because you could actually leave these behind every time you eat at a restaurant or that kind of thing. We get a lot of feedback from business owners who complain about they never see Main Street. And even if they've got somebody coming in their door every single week, they still complain about not seeing them. So this is actually a tactic that a lot of police departments use, where they drop these cards just to prove that they were there. And it's like the idea of it's okay if you end up getting a stack of 35 cards building up on the desk waiting for the owner, So it's just think about ways that you can make sure that every effort that you make is realized to the people you're trying to help. Now, we had a good discussion with the board about the destination brand. And what I mean there is we know that our organization is Main Street Monroe, but we know that the destination that we're promoting is downtown. And I wanted, after thinking about it, and I thought a lot about our conversation, and I think that you nailed it, with where we are as an organization right now, we don't want to make things too complicated. We don't want to be the stewards of 2 different brands. But I did decide to create a variation that simply changes Main Street to downtown and changes that tagline to the perfect slice of home. And that way you have a graphic identity that perfectly aligns with the Main Street, but then you also have an identity that you're comfortable allowing the business community to use from a merchandising standpoint. Does that make sense? So I don't feel like it's duplicating the brand management. If we had had two completely different identities, it would be a lot harder to figure out what to use when. But having this just kind of in your pocket, even if you don't roll it out now, I think it was a very simple solution. Now, then we move on to brand extension, and this to me is where it gets super fun. So we've got these four components of the foundation, but every single time you put on an event, if the event does not tie into that brand system, then the participants in the event, the people that are brought into the community, they don't know where to attribute their positive experiences. So what I've done is I've created a series of logos for your events that tie in to the overall brand system. And it really treat this like a buffet of design, because I don't want you to think everything has to look exactly alike. So we start off with Cars on the Square. Okay? Again, you see a square graphic element in each and every composition. You can see that secondary typeface is being used up top, but then I still have the latitude to select some typefaces that are going to better connect with the gearheads and the classic car lovers. Because it's more important that you know that a classic car show is going to have a certain audience. It's more important that that logo connect with that audience than it is force the brand continuity. So you're using some colors, using a little bit of typeface, but not doing too much. Concerts on the Square. The logo you have for Concerts on the Square right now is great. Super cool logo, but it ties into that overall city. So this is just a simple suggestion of something cool that you might do where you kind of tie in and just, it gives you that M again, but it can just be yours. And you could start to see where you could even create some of those like step and repeat or concert backdrops that interchange that event icon with that destination icon. Farmers market, again, being able to be a little bit more complex. Right now, the farmers market is just a word type with your Main Street logo in the middle of it. So being able to have something that's a little bit more graphic related to the event itself. We see a lot of farmers market that do sell merchandise just for the market. We see people selling aprons and things like that. So, being able to find ways that you can kind of tie all that in together. And this particular design was actually inspired a little bit by this year's Cheese Days logo, which I think is actually kind of cool. It's riding on the appropriate trend for some of the design style that's popular right now. I try not to overthink everything, doing simple things like Maxwell Street Days, again, having that square element in the back, but making something that's easy to read. Project Pop-Up, again, being able to use those different ideas, different concepts. St. Patrick's Day Parade. Like, what I want to do is I want you all to have a platform so that the idea of how to represent things that you're doing doesn't become this long, drawn-out, resource-rich process. But instead, you feel like you have this foundation that makes it very easy for you to just take it and run with it. I love this one. The wine walk, I think this is a really, really great event that we heard about. You guys are doing some good stuff with your events. Wine walk seems to be one of the key retail promotions that's getting people in and getting the registers to ring. Now, this next thing that I want to show you is not really an event logo because it ties into this summer's theme. And I think that what y'all have done with this is really cool. I did share with Jordan beforehand, and I just want to reiterate with you all quickly. Of all the things that we heard about and all the things that we talked about yesterday, the summer theme, I think, is the thing that is the most undersold, if that makes sense. Like, you have a kickoff, and then you have a summer theme. But for a person who's not from here, I'm like, a kickoff of what? And a summer theme of what? And you do something that I find to be truly amazing, but are we missing out on this opportunity to be able to clearly convey to a visitor who might come that you owe it to yourself to come back summer after summer and truly explore the depth of each year's theme? And I think it's one of those things where locally you're so immersed in it and you know how awesome it is that it's kind of like, well, we don't need to, like, it's awesome. Like, we're building a freaking rocket ship, you know, like, we got this. And I think it's just one of those things where, from a marketing standpoint, make sure that you have the receptacle that's going to hold all the positive experience so whether it's called sculptures on the square or whether it's some sort of, you know, arts a lot, I don't know, I didn't feel like I could even suggest what that should be. I simply want to say I think y'all are doing something awesome and I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. But I did want to just create one additional variation for this summer because I love the space theme and, you know, creating your own little NASA logo. I think that's the kind of stuff you could sell and get some merchandise and that kind of thing. So, you know, what you end up starting to see is you start to see this series of events. Now, I've got one on here that I didn't talk about, Monroe and Bloom. I think that you also should brand that process of going through and doing all the planters. Make sure that Main Street and downtown gets the credit for that burst of color and that beautification. But what you start to see here is you start to see an interconnected system. You can preserve individuality of the different characters of the events, but you can also show that they're all part of a similar system. Does that make sense? Okay. Couple additional things that I wanted to show you. And I called these tactics because they're a little bit all over the board. One of the things we talked about with design committee is we talked about how you did have a facade grant, funding for the facade grant isn't really there anymore. How can we explore some things? And I talked about what I call a component grant system. One of the things that I would love to suggest to you all is what we have termed vibrancy grants. Vibrancy grants are so cool because they take virtually no money and they make huge impact in terms of experience. Vibrancy grants are literally for any element that adds life to your downtown. So it can be bistro chairs, it can be umbrellas, it can be Adirondack chairs, you know, just really cool creative things, you know, having spaces that typically people would say you couldn't have outdoor dining and figuring out how to fit that stuff in there. It can be murals on sidewalks, it can be art integrated into any of those things that you do throughout the community. Even seeing little things like this is an artist out of South Carolina that takes propane tanks and welds them together and they become drums. And like you will just find like people are always drawn to making noise and wet. You know, it's like, oh, so they just go to it. So what I'm calling this is I'm just calling it Vibrant Downtown. So just this simple program, and literally you can do this kind of stuff with $500. Just going out there and starting. It can be signage. It can be, you know, anything that just flags, little things that just show activity spilling out of the businesses onto the streets so that when you drive around downtown, you feel like it is alive. The next thing, I know that we've got kind of a reboot with economic restructuring, and we've got some, the wheels are starting to turn there. This is a little bit down the road, but I'd love to suggest that you consider something like what I call Startup Monroe. And again, you see kind of a derivation of that tagline, bringing energy downtown. What this would be is this would be a business plan competition. You partner with a property owner who might be willing to give a certain period of discounted rent. You could partner with local designers who might volunteer to create a branding package for the business, an accountant that might volunteer to donate startup, you know, on getting those financials straight. So you target some of those businesses that you feel like downtown is missing. You make the call for business plan, you go through and you select a winner, and then you help them to succeed. Because the thing that we know is the district always gets blamed for the failure. Nobody ever says, well, they must not have had an adequate business plan. You know, it's like, see, I told you that couldn't work downtown. So, you know, I think this is a pretty cool opportunity for you to kind of tag into. I also always like to show different examples of collateral. So these are the type of things that as you create this brand, you can make these resources available to the business community. So, you know, being able to have merchandise that people could buy. And, you know, the problem is, and I kind of asked the question, I know a couple of you guys were selling stuff, but generally, if you're in a community, you can either buy a local high school shirt or anything else that's actually community related is what I call a car wash t-shirt. It's one of those shirts that's so ugly that you only wear it to cut your grass or paint, you know, that has like 7,000 logos on the back. And so being able to have actual products that people are interested in purchasing is important. Doing reusable shopping bags, this could be something that you sell through the farmer's market, be something that could be available through the businesses downtown. Again, you know, shirts, different kinds of apparel. This is a Swell bottle, and I don't know, I've got 5 kids. My oldest, I remember the first time she asked me if she could have a Swell bottle, and it literally, I mean, imagine when a kid walks up and says, can I have a new car? Like, that's what it sounded like. And I was like, what? Why are you acting like it's such a big deal? Well, because it's a $45 water bottle. Apparently, it has, like, little fairies that live inside it. Keep your beverages cold. But the reason that I show these is I think that there's a very, very important concept that we oftentimes miss when we talk about branded merchandise. We always consider price point first. And we always try to create the lowest price point item for someone to buy. It's almost like we don't expect that someone would be willing to pay a premium price to show their pride in the community. And when you take premium items like this that have pre-existing brand equity and you put your logo on them, you actually transfer that value that's pre-existing over to your community. So, you know, a lot of times if I have a community that's going through and is trying to position themselves for outdoor recreation, I'll say what you need to do is you need to go out and get 10 Patagonia vests and embroider your logo on those vests and give them out to people that are visible in the community, because that association between you and Patagonia will say we're serious about outdoors. So just think about different brand co-oping opportunities that could be beneficial to you all and be beneficial from a business standpoint as well. A couple of the other things, we talked a little bit about vacancy treatments and being able to take some creative approaches to vacancy. You all have had a sign around that looks, you've had this building isn't empty, it's full of opportunity, which is one of Jay's greatest ideas, I think, that he's come up with. It goes, you know, people use that all over the place. But also being able to have these, I wish I was. So it's like a chalkboard where people can write down ideas of what kind of business they would like to see. Think about that interaction. If you have these clings or these boards on the windows of vacant properties, and then you have a prospect come to look at that property, and they see all these different ideas from individuals, it almost doesn't matter what ideas they come up with. It matters more that people are showing that they care about what happens there. So taking every opportunity you can to take advantage of those. One of the great things about downtown Monroe is you don't have a high vacancy rate compared to a lot of communities. So it's not something that would be resource heavy for you to be able to do that kind of stuff. Then some of the other things too is just simply being able to have maybe sandwich board signs that help people to get excited about works in progress, projects that are going on board and that kind of thing. In addition to all this stuff, one of the other things that I've done is I've created this how to be a brand partner page. And what this does is this is literally intended for your event organizers in your business community. And it's simply a list of suggestions of ways that people might be able to connect and utilize the brand. And a lot of this obviously would be more downtown oriented than directly Main Street because you want to kind of control that organizational brand a little. But this is really a good way to start focusing in on partnership between the organization and the private sector in rolling that brand out. And then the other thing that I'm going to share with you all is what I call a brand score sheet. This is something that I've created after doing this for 16 years. And it has nothing to do with creativity. It literally is just asking you a set of questions about how you've implemented your brand. And it'll allow you to set a really nice benchmark for where you are now. And then it'll allow you to quickly identify some of the things that are kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of brand implementation. And figuring out how to make sure that you're communicating effectively. Make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so that's what I did since yesterday. What's y'all thoughts?
Did you sleep?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
24 hours later. Wow.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, you think? I mean, do the...
Nice tie-in, I think, all the way around.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we need to get something different because people want to know what we're part of the city or...
Absolutely. And one of the things that I did do is I made sure, like I took the suggested Main Street logo and I put it right next to the chamber as if they were on a poster together as co-sponsors. They feel completely fine being next to each other, yet don't feel like they duplicate one another. And, you know, that just the subtle gesture, I mean, I'm not sure whether y'all have realized it or not, but you're not allowed to design a logo in Monroe without the courthouse on it. It's a rule I figured out, like you have to have that. And, you know, to a certain degree, it's almost one of those things where it's so ubiquitous it would seem wrong for it to be missing. So that's why I tried to incorporate it in a way that was a different graphic approach than others. And being able to have it still present but feel very different.
I like the tagline.
That's all you. You nailed it. You said it without even knowing it.
Very good.
But I love the up arrow in the courthouse.
Oh, yeah.
And that's pointing towards the future, and I think we need to definitely paint that on the rocket ship.
Oh,
Rocket
that's
ship's
cool.
Almost done.
Okay, well, we'll give
Except
it
for the
stickers.
painting.
Yeah, because you got to get your mask on the side of it too. Like, come on, we got.
The line walk one though, that is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I love that one.
Well, the other thing is we've gotten so used to, let's create something, throw the Main Street logo. And
Yeah.
something since I've been involved, trying to educate people, Cars on the Square, it's Main Street Cars on the Square. It's Main Street concerts. So everybody thought it's concerts, and people think it's Colony's concerts because.
Right.
So, again, this changes everything. It's really good.
Would you ever put like Wisconsin anywhere for a national?
You know, I think that with the way, I mean, one of the nice things about the way that I designed it was it's set up kind of in a modular format. So if you were ever inclined, I would never have a Main Street logo that said Wisconsin, but I could see the benefit in having a downtown variation where you change the tagline to Wisconsin. And I think that there is some value there, knowing that you are bringing people from Northern Illinois, you know, that idea of leaving the state and going somewhere else, that could be a very valuable variation.
Yeah, I'm guessing every state has a Monroe, so that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. I wanted to be very mindful of not setting the expectation too high. I don't think that you guys are going to do a tremendous amount of out-of-state marketing. I'm a big fan of having the tool in the toolbox, even if you don't need it. So I think it's a great point, and I'm more than happy to create that variation and kind of drop it in there. But I think it's one of those things where rolling it out smooth and easy and feeling like you have that connective tissue and all the things you're already doing is really big. Everything that you see is yours. So I'm going to create a style guide document. I'm going to give you all the typefaces. I'm going to define all the color definitions so you can consistently roll those out. I'm going to save every single logo and logo variation in 5 different file formats. So you have 3 different vectors, and then you'll have a PNG file that does not have the white background, so you can actually place things without a white rectangle around everything. And then I'll also give you a JPEG. So are you, if I'm sending over EPSs and illustrators
Yeah,
and
it's perfect.
vector PDFs, so I'll sit there and I'll produce all that stuff. The style guide document is about 12 pages. It tells you how to use it, how not to use it. And then we'll have a thumbnail sheet to reference all those. And literally that will all exist digitally. So you can share the link that I give you with anybody. And it will, all of my native files, I'm going to share that stuff. So if I created something in InDesign, there are a couple things I think I did in InDesign, I'll go ahead and save that out and make sure that y'all have those. So literally it is just intended to be that springboard for you to be able to take the toolkit and run with it.
How would you recommend to kick this all off?
That's my next question. What do communities do when they say,
So here's the deal. Sometimes they do these big celebrations, but honestly, I know how Main Streets work, and Main Streets aren't rich. So as anticlimactic as it sounds, the best thing to do is start using it. And it's almost like you need to start rolling it out, and it needs to make its way into the public, and then you celebrate that it's new. And it seems counterintuitive, but people don't pay attention to things. So it's funny, it's like you can roll it out and then announce that you've done it, and then they'll start to connect the dots. But if you say that you have a new thing and you have a delay in them being able to see it, then they feel the flash and then they feel the letdown. So it's more important for you to just have a more organic rolling launch, and then at an appropriate time, you can kind of celebrate that you've done this new thing. Now, that being said, if there's an appropriate time when the merchants come together, you absolutely could kind of do a formal rollout to the business community with the ask that they think about products or merchandise that might be beneficial to their businesses. And so it's almost like you have a business oriented rollout, and then later down the road you have a public launch or a public acknowledgement. Does that make sense? I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they make too big of a deal at the very beginning before it's gotten any legs under it, because everybody will have an opinion. And honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, we need a change. We need to look different from everybody else. And at the end of the day, it sounds horrible, but it's like, we need it to look good. We don't need it to be the compromise that everyone would agree that they'd be willing to tattoo it on their arm. It's like, we want to stick out from the market. We don't want to water it down to the point where everybody's like, okay, I can live with that forever. It's not a tattoo.
I could see, I think that logo would look really good engraved as well. I could see putting little plaques on all the benches around
oh
downtown.
my goodness.
You know, that could be a really quick hit thing
Yeah.
that we could get done to get that branding out, and then follow up with window clings, and the other signage of this is full of opportunity and all those other kind of things. Was it 7 times people have to see it before it sticks in their head?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Well, what's the name also, Doc's theory is 5 years. Everything takes 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I will tell you, one of my designers and my brother they just hopped on a plane heading back for Belize City, and we did branding for Belize City a year and a half ago, and they're now down there doing a wayfinding plan for them, and like the whole trip, I've just been getting pictures of implementation, and it's everywhere. They started out with street banners, and then they rolled in and they started doing, there are plaques, everybody on their city government is called city council, like the whole government is referred to as Belize City Council. So the entire Belize City Council has t-shirts, and they enacted Casual Friday, and everybody wears their t-shirts. And it's just, crazy stuff that every community always wants to know. It's like, okay, so what's our implementation roadmap? what do we do first? And it's just not that formulaic. I mean, it's all about resources, and the easiest thing to do is do the stuff that's easiest. And that for some reason is counterintuitive. We decide we want to do the hardest, the biggest, the most ambitious, and we end up losing out. It's so funny. I told you about the brand score sheet. On the brand score sheet, you get more points for having your logo as your Facebook profile than you do for having your logo on a gateway sign. Because gateway signs cost like $20,000, and it's just not that important in the grand scheme of things. So go through and do the low hanging fruit, get it out there where you can create that consistency, get to that 7 with the lowest cost, and then from there you're going to have the momentum to keep it pushing forward.
Oh boy.
Well, and here's one of the things, and Jay said to not do this, but it's just because it was not something that I got to. And I always like to talk to people about banners, because I'm a big believer in banners, but I also believe that most people use banners wrong. So first of all, if you are going to figure out a way to pay for banners, please don't go and buy pre-stock design, the daffodil and the leaf and if you're going to do that, see it as a branding opportunity, but then also see it as the opportunity to be strategic. Banners are essentially signage, and you want your signage to work for you. In your square, one of the things that we have seen, and it has been the case at least since 2007 when we were here, is there's ample parking and there's very little pedestrian crossing of corners. It's like they will park in a side, they will walk up and down the side, and then they will get back in the car, and then they might move to another side, or they might just leave. Use banners in a really intelligent way to create the 4 sides of the square. You might decide to have designs, and what I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you the same design on 4 different backgrounds. And people automatically think, oh, well, we'll alternate every other pole. No, pick a side. That side's the red side. That side's the green side. That side's the blue side. And then what you end up having is that creates rhythm. So you look down and you understand the rhythm. It lowers the ceiling of what you're looking at and allows you to focus in on that streetscape and everything that's happening outside the stores. And people have this really weird, like this psychology thing going where they hate missing out. So if they've only explored blue and they haven't made it to red, they haven't feel like they've seen it. So you're using your banners to push your district and kind of push your pedestrian impact. And then you also want to use your banners to drive people down the nodes that they're missing. So you might design a slightly different design for 11th Street down past the theater and the post office. So as you're doing the square, knowing that this is our circulation pattern, same thing with if you're heading down towards Monroe Middle School, and then what is that, 12th? Is that 12th? 12th, I walked down 12th for the first time ever, because I always walk down and walk all the way and turn in front of the school and Turner Hall and come back around that way. So using banners to kind of denote certain nodes of importance that might get overlooked. So just think really strategically about them and just realize that they're definitely a lot more than just pretty. But I'll make sure before I wrap it up tonight, because I had started playing around with that and just didn't get it done, I'll design those 4 different color variations for the square itself.
So I'm sorry, so like the off streets, what color would you use on the off streets?
I think it's one of those things where you could do a lot of different things. I mean, typically most of the time, especially in this particular environment, I always lean more towards this umbrella canvas with screen print, but you can conceivably do 4 color on vinyl. I'm not sure with as cold and as it gets. I don't know what their lifespan is on these. But you want to do something that is different. Doesn't necessarily have to be a different color. It can be a different rhythm. It can be a a different design, but it's something that breaks off the preconceived program of driving the square.
You know how nice that would be though? People came in Sunday and they're like, where can I go eat? And I'm like, well, there's North Side or there's
Yeah.
Swiss House. I didn't know North Side was even closed. But you can just say, go down where the red banners are. And then
Yeah.
once you get to the end of the red banners, you're gonna see these
Right.
blue banners.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
And you're gonna be in
east
the
and
right
north.
area.
Direction up to Buggy Works.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah.
Go
But
to
now-
the blue
But
Banner's End.
Go to
Maple.
Bartles and walk through and go through the alley.
Right.
But now we're helping those businesses that are the offshoot, because we're always trying to, but how do you? This is a way to keep the continuity.
Absolutely.
I thought too, we've had this discussion about the sandwich boards and how every store is their own random. What if we subsidized or worked with stores to do a Main Street or downtown Monroe sandwich board? And each store would pay, 2/3 or whatever they cost. Then we would have consistent sandwich boards all around downtown as well.
So per side,
I'm sorry?
you're saying? Per side, see if the businesses are available each side type thing?
Well, right now, like I've got a big white one, and then the next door they got a little open one, and then there's a metal one over here by, Sequels or whatever. I was just thinking if we did a consistent,
Uniform one all the way around.
yeah.
And
open-
here's the thing, it's okay for there to be variation. Like that variation's good. It's organic. You don't want to over corporate it, but you do want to give access to the signage. Again, I would actually say that if you're exploring anything from the signage standpoint, one of the things that you would say, that's where that vibrancy grant comes in. And if you're going to offer a grant, then you can also offer the assistant to make sure that the sandwich board looks good. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If you're going to give a grant to help somebody with signage, then maybe you can do some cool projecting signage that really looks good. So it's the golden rule. He with the gold makes the rules. So it's like if you're going to incent, you incent to have it nice. But don't worry about, there are a lot of things that we do at times. We've designed standardized hours signs before. And we didn't do it because we expected everybody to have the same hour signs. We did it because, by God, everybody needed an hour sign.
Right.
So it's like, if you don't have one, here, use this, because this looks a lot better than the neon orange Walmart, closed sign. So, just think about the ways that you can fill the gaps, but also still preserve the individuality and uniqueness business to business. Any of these things you feel like, was there something that we had talked about that I missed or didn't hit on?
I didn't attend any of the meetings, but I really liked this presentation you did.
Awesome.
Yeah, but
Right.
everybody introduced themselves, so I think it's your turn to introduce yourself.
I remember you.
You do?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Were you on council in 07?
No. I was part of Main Street Promotion Committee back then.
Yeah.
So I said the same.
I think that's good. I don't think that's a bad thing.
And this is Jean.
Hey, Jean.
Might not want to put, might not want to work too hard on sandwich boards because they might be illegal coming up pretty soon. Yeah,
Illegal sandwich boards?
yeah, might not be able to allow them on sidewalk anymore. They've talked about that a few months ago and they
Well,
just haven't done anything.
And there you go.
Main Street Council to just share.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. It's like that is one of the best things that Main Street can do is get involved in those type processes. I mean, can you believe that in 2018 we can still go into communities where they have passed ordinances that don't allow dining on the sidewalk?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like there are simple things that are very much appropriate in a historic downtown district that would not be appropriate in the rest of the community. And it's okay to have different rules for different places that have different looks and different feels.
That was Monroe up until about 4 years ago.
I'm gonna run. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Really
Awesome.
I'm
And
excited.
up until about 2008, something like that, we weren't able to have alcohol out on the square.
Right.
And the very first time, we had a 20 by 40 fence in area to serve and drink alcohol. And someone on city council said it's gonna be just like Mifflin Street in Madison.
I don't think it'll like it. Right.
Now we have that whole side of the square, whatever it is, in front of Bob Ritter's, we got that all blocked off.
Yeah.
Concert and open container,
Mm-hmm.
and how many people you estimate? Over 1,000 in there?
I would say it's
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
No problems.
Everybody's well behaved.
Even the chief of police likes it.